I think let's maybe rein in our enthusiasm of becoming a defense superpower in such a short time frame. But nonetheless, let's talk about the two companies that we have, Data Patterns and Paras. So let's maybe start with Data Patterns and give our viewers a sense of why this is so much of a market darling. So I think previously we've discussed the three key figures being order book, revenue, and profit, and what they mean.
Comes the most exciting part for these
Yeah.
companies. Their performance and track record is not as, I would say, tepid as the PSU defense companies. So
Right.
that's it.
So I think Data Patterns order book has grown at 38% compounded over the last 5 years.
Wow.
Yeah. Their revenues have grown at 28% compounded over the last 5 years. And here's, wait for the absolute blowout number of words.
Profit after tax.
Yes, the PAT has grown at 74% compounded over the last 5 years.
Wow.
And I mean, just before, investors turn around and push their money into the stock, let's just take a second to also realize that they're extremely richly valued. 84 PE, which is sky high levels by any account.
Yeah, but I'm not surprised with that. If you have growth of kind of 74% compound, and the street is expecting 40-50% compound growth for the next 3 years or so, and if the stock price stays at these levels, you will see this price to earnings multiple dwindle in the next 2-3 years or so.
Right.
And even 3-4 years from now, I think a company like Data Pattern has a great future.
Right.
Because they'll keep on investing in technologies. Their customers will require more and more high tech, uh, high high cost equipment, which will means that their margins are maintained, and there's a huge market for them to export as well as supply to the domestic market. So I'm not surprised with investors' enthusiasm for Data Patterns. And typically, Varun, in this market, I've seen that when there are very such niche investment themes and only 2 or 3 companies which you can invest in for those niche investment themes, those stocks always get marked up on a price to earnings multiple, and which is why Data Patterns is trading at this 80 times plus. And mind you, I think a lot of the growth has come post listing. As I remember, it got listed at 864, and it's more than doubled to about 1800 rupees at this point of time in about I would say 1.5 years or so. So great listing and a great listing track record for Data Patterns.
So let's give the viewers a sense of exactly what Data Patterns is, what they do, and how they add value to the defense ecosystem. So Data Patterns primarily provides electronics communications equipment and radar systems. And I think when we look at how warfare plays out today, where most of the action is beyond visual range, these radar systems need to be extremely sophisticated, and they're one of the most important components of any military, particularly because they need to be extremely tightly coupled across multiple devices, and that data needs to be very carefully integrated, which is where I guess the Data Patterns name come from.
Exactly. So you can imagine how difficult these things are to manufacture, and technology keeps on changing, and you need constant upgradation as well. So I think a company like Data Patterns has a great future, and it's one of these businesses where you will see great earnings potential over the next several years or so. Markets have recognized it, which is why they are trading at these P multiples. But I think that on a correction, if you look at Data Patterns on a longer term horizon, I think it has a great future, particularly because of its scale, because of its presence, and again, it gets built that moat around it, because
Right.
of its products. It's not very easy for people to start offering products and services what Data Pattern offers.
Yeah, and I think that's reflecting the quality of their customers. I think ISRO, DRDO, HAL, Bharat Dynamics, it's I guess a blue chip customers to have really in the space.
Absolutely. And mind you, none of the India business groups have been able to crack this business. So there must be something in the promoters and entrepreneurs of Data Patterns. They are technocrats. They have a deep understanding of the technologies and of the requirements of the Indian defense industry, which is why they are so successful.
Right. So let's move on from Data Patterns to the other darling of the space, Paras Defense and Space Technologies. So I guess let's maybe talk about what makes Paras Defense and Space such a really unique play.
Yeah, that's right. I think because the name also is not just defense, it's space as well. And India has been making great strides when it comes to all of its space endeavors as well. We've been manufacturing satellites and rockets, and we've been trying to increase our spending on space technologies. And that's where a company like Paras Defense also comes into play. Again, all of these businesses are very technology intensive. It requires many, many years of being pre-qualified. Then you have to maintain a high degree of systems quality control to ensure that the order flow and the supply is as per the expectations of the customer. A lot of testing also goes into the products and systems which these companies supply. And from that point of view, I think Paras Defense has been a huge, huge success. Why don't you roll out the numbers? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I think in comparison, the data patterns Paras may not look as fantastic, but still a really, really quality set of numbers. So their order book has grown at 46% compounded over the last 5 years, which is very healthy by any standards. Although revenue's only grown about 6.7%, profit has done very well at 13.6%. So maybe not data patterns, but I guess they're growing off a much larger base.
that's right, I think, and these businesses are very difficult to understand what their growth rates can be. As we've been talking in this podcast, it's very technology intensive, and therefore, for us to understand and project where these companies could be 3, 4 years from now is very difficult. All we can say is that the underlying momentum on defense spending, on indigenization programs is very strong, and that's where companies like Data Patterns and Paras Defense come into play. But mind you, Paras Defense trades at a reasonable,
Yeah,
comparatively
comparatively
reasonable
reasonable PE.
price earning multiple of 63, 64 times or so. And again, I think if they grow their profits by 30, 40%, which is what is expected over the next 3 to 4 years or so, this kind of a price to earnings multiple may seem to be justified.
Absolutely.
But the key thing again in both Paras Defense and Data Patterns is that we should expect volatility in their earnings quarter on quarter. Because sometimes the order flows and ebbs. So they have good quarters when a lot of deliveries take place, a lot of subsystems are ready and are being accepted by their customers, and there could be lean periods as well.
Yeah, and I think Paris is got a relatively unique set of subsystems, in which is why they're able to offer it to both the aerospace industry as well as the space industry. Maybe let's take a second to explain to our viewers what it is that they provide. So, Paris Aerospace primarily works in the optical systems and EMP systems space. So, I think we talked about data patterns as being beyond visual range and enabling warfare beyond visual range. Paras primarily works in extending visual range, so hyperspectral imaging equipment, underwater imaging equipment, long distance imaging equipment, things that go up in satellites. And I guess that's their unique competence. But I think they have a very unique way of approaching what it is that they do.
Yeah, that's right. I think the way you spoke about these products, I can just imagine how difficult they are to manufacture,
Right.
maintain. I mean, and that clearly is the moat for these companies that it's not easy to replicate what they are doing.
Yeah. So Paris actually has a very unique strategy where they don't. I think data patterns, maybe what they do is they develop these products in house. They, make them perfect, and then they deliver them to their customers. Paris works with entrepreneurs, um, and Paris aims to build new business lines through subsidiary companies.
Like
So
drones.
yeah, exactly. So we spoke about, their optical imaging systems, but one of their more exciting segments in the future is drone technology. And I think we'll get into how exactly they're building up their drone capabilities, but I guess to explain why drones are so important, we spoke about how the skies over Ukraine are clear in the last podcast and why that means a mixed future for the aerospace industry. But that's not entirely accurate. The sky is full of drones. All the way down to a unit level, drones are being used for targeting missiles. They're being used as complementary pieces of equipment to, a set of soldiers, a squadron of
So they're
soldiers.
the foot soldiers of the future.
Exactly. So drones are part of the foot soldiers of the future, and to see an indigenous drone manufacturer, and IdeaForge is another one, but maybe one for another day. But to see a defense-focused drone manufacturer coming to the table is quite positive news for India's defense.
Absolutely, and I think as and when this subsidiary of theirs gathers scale, it'll create a lot of value for shareholders of Paras Defense as well. So I think these are all exciting businesses to be in, and these are businesses of the future, and there will be a great deal of earning visibility, which is also reflected in the stock price. But I think at least investors have a choice between going for the large uh, PSU defense companies, and you have these nimble-footed private
Private sector
sector
defense
defense.
players. Yeah.
And mind you, there's a great deal of more aggression in the private sector defense companies. And I think they are very well placed to exploit the export market even better than the PSU defense
Right.
companies. You should keep that in mind.
Absolutely. And I think I'm really gonna tease this out for our users, where we're gonna be talking about the numbers of the export market in the next podcast. But I wanted to just take a quick second to talk about the future of private sector defense players. Right now we only have two. Are there any more defense IPOs on the horizon? Do we expect to see more defense players coming into the market?
Well, I should hope so. In due course, we'll have many more such par as defense and data patterns as well. But
This
more
podcast is produced by
important,
Elixir Equities Pvt, a SEBI registered research analyst. Registration number INA00004787. The information provided in this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only and should not be considered as investment advice. Investment in securities market are subject to market risk. We strongly advise all investors to read all related documents carefully before investing.